So today as we talk about lawn care, lawn maintenance, fixing the grass, that sort of thing, there's a few parts that we need to look at. First off, we've got things like walking paths or dirt areas that should be grass, and whether it's because of people trampling on those a lot or digging up projects, things like that. It may be a matter of replanting some grass in a small area, a small spot, or a bigger area. You could have areas that are unlevel. You've got areas where you've had weed or moss and you've taken care of that. So we're going to talk about a few of these situations today, give some tips. One of the things that before we even really begin doing the work that we need to do is to do just a quick mowing of the grass, get everything nice and low so you can kind of see what you're working with. So let me start by doing a quick mowing of the grass, and then we'll move on to some tips and kind of walk through the process. And 15 minutes later, the grass is mowed and ready to go kind of look a little deeper at what we can do with this. So general maintenance and upkeep is to keep your grass watered throughout the year, especially in the dry season if you have that, and then also to keep it full of nutrients. I've got a couple other problems in the grass that you may not be able to see from a distance like this. The one thing to remember is you cannot fix everything at once instantaneously. Even if you were to go and spend a fortune and have it replaced, nothing is fixed instantaneous. Plants take time. It takes time to do this well, and especially for most of us on any sort of budget, it's not practical to go and dig it up and start with fresh sod. Although that is a way some people might do it. So a lot of this takes time, so it could take a season, it could even take a couple of years to really get it, if you're really going for kind of that golf course manicure look. So this is something that I'll start now, and I'll do a little bit here in the spring, later spring, early summer, and I'll kind of just keep on top of it. It really is a maintenance thing. It really is a process to have beautiful lawn. Nothing happens instantaneously, and none of it is a one-time fix. So let's zoom in and take a look at some of the different issues in the grass, and we'll talk about some strategies to fix that. Okay, you can see bare spots here, so I'm actually going to take some of my sand and compost mix. So this area here was from a burn. I've got a campfire nearby and some wonderful high school students that were here. Took a big metal prong out of the fire, a poker that I have, and stabbed it into the grass here, burned the grass. Now this will grow back in a couple of weeks. You'll start seeing this all turn green again, but you could just take a little bit of the potting mix, rub it in, and that's pretty unnecessary. You could actually just water it and it'll recover in a matter of a few weeks, but it doesn't hurt. Might as well use the magic powder. All right, so I have something has happened right here. You can see the brown spot. So sometimes you'll get those and there'll be very brown grass in a circle, and that typically is something has spilled there. This one in particular is not from that. I actually had a propane tank sitting there while I was burning a little fire nearby. And because of the amount of propane going through there, that area froze, and so that's actually from freezing grass. 6 weeks later, here is the spot. Actually, this might have been that burn spot, one of the two, I can't tell exactly, but as you can see, it's better. All right, here we have uneven grass, which isn't super noticeable, but you can see here, this grass here is very short because that's kind of high, and then you see where those thicker spots are, that's dropped down quite a bit. All right, here I backed up and put a board down just to give you some perspective. down here, you could almost fit a baseball in there. There's a softball, full-size softball. So you can see there's a definite low spot, and then it returns back up. So what do you do when you got uneven grass? So with the leveling the grass here, what I've got is I've got several spots that are just a hair low, so maybe that's a 1/2 inch low. There's a few spots here, like this is probably the deepest I've found so far, that's a couple inches low. And I don't want to go and put my sand compost mix over a couple inches, because that's just going to kill what was there. The grass won't be able to grow through it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting down a little bit at a time. So I'll put down you know, maybe a 1/4 inch, kind of spread that out, rake it a little bit so the grass petals can kind of come through there. Water that and let it sit for a month. And then maybe in a month, 2 months, I'll come back and do it again. It's really good to do it in the spring and in the fall. And you can kind of just slowly start leveling this thing off. But that's one of the kind of go-to less impactful ways to fix the leveling issue. So let me show you what I'm gonna do here. All right, so I know that this is not fully level yet. However, I have about a 1/4 inch or so, maybe even slightly more than that in that deepest spot, and I'm going to slowly build that up as the rain and eventually the sprinklers hit this. That sand will settle in there, the grass will continue to grow, and I'll just continue over time just to put a little bit more in there and see if I can kind of level out some of these big areas. So that's one way to start filling in some of those low spots in the grass, if you've had any settling, that sort of thing. 6 weeks later, it's all gone. You can't tell where I did that work. It is more level. I'll still need to do that one more time, but pretty good. For the area under the archway here, I've got about a 10-foot wide, 12-foot deep area that is got some grass, I'd say maybe 30% grass, and then there's a lot of dirt spots. Some of that is dirt just because it's been so walked on and trampled on that the grass doesn't grow well there. Some of that was former garden areas when I built the arch. Used to be part of some garden beds that never had grass seed planted, and that's now been trampled on. So this whole area is really hard and compact. There is good soil there, but it is just it's trampled on, and so when the rains come, it gets in there, kind of puddles up or kind of goes off it, but it's not doesn't drain very well in there. And then it's also really uneven. So some of that's just from what's been there, but I haven't really worked on this area yet. So my plan here is I'm gonna get my pickaxe, I'm gonna scuff up the top 3 inches or so, kind of look and see if I got any rocks in there, get this thing nice and leveled out with a rake. Then I'm gonna come back in with some sand and compost. I have a 50-50 mix. I'm gonna go and take a couple loads of that, mix that in, kind of mix it into that top couple inches, and then get my roller, and I'm gonna flatten this thing out nice and level and nice and firm. I'll get some more of that mix, sprinkle it over the top, put some grass seed, roll it a couple times, water it, and then let this thing grow for several weeks before anyone walks on it. And in the spring here, have a chance to kind of get that grass seed, not just growing, but really getting full in there, and then I'll open this back up for the beauty. So come see how we're gonna work this. All right, you can see behind me here, I've tilled up the ground, and while I had that tilled up, I went and raked that out, made sure I had any big rocks or anything out of there, nicely broken up, and then I've put that 50-50 sand compost mix down and just spread over a couple inches. Now that'll settle down over time, so what I'm gonna start doing now is I wanna get this thing nice and compact. So I went and borrowed a roller. You can also rent them real cheap at the local hardware store, but find someone that has green, beautiful grass, and there's a chance they have a roller somewhere in their backyard. But I'm gonna go ahead and between walking on this, rolling this, and just going back over with a rake, get this thing nice and level. My plan right now is to go ahead and level this thing out, get this nice and firm, and get it ready for some grass seed. All right, as you can see here, I've got this thing pretty well ready to go for seed. So I've got this thing watered down pretty heavily. I've checked to see if there's any low spots, and it looks pretty solid. It looks pretty compact. And so my next step is I want to lay down the seed, and I'm going to sprinkle the seed with my hand actually because of the small area. I don't want to get grass seed if I'm using a spreader of any sort. I don't want it spreading into my garden beds and creating weeds. So I'm gonna carefully lay it out, but also I'm gonna be using seed that is from 2015. So it's old seed. Now it sprouted last year just fine, but I've got a partial bag that I've got available, and hopefully it's still good. But I'm gonna go ahead and lay that down, and I'm gonna go a little thicker just in case some of it doesn't sprout, but lay that down, and then I'm gonna go over that with I have a potting mix which has a bit of peat moss mixed in, and I'm just gonna sprinkle that in lightly over here and water that again. And pretty much kind of the rule of thumb, something my dad taught me was if you can see the seed, it won't grow. So you don't want it buried, but you do want that lightly covered with either peat moss or a potting mix or something like that. So I'm gonna do that, water it, and then with springtime and the temperatures where they're at, hopefully in the next week or so, we'll start seeing some of that seed start taking, and then in a couple of weeks, be able to walk on here and have a beautiful grass. So watch what I do. So I've been laying the seed down, and I'm going to zoom in and show you what it looks like, but I just took that by hand and just kind of sprinkled that over this area. So let me go ahead now and take you into the seed. I want to show you how thick I put it on. Now this is a little heavier than I normally do it, but with this being older seed and just the concern about how much of it would germinate, I thought, well, I'm going to go ahead and go heavy, and I've got it. So let me show you what this looks like. So you can see here, pretty heavy on there. This is probably more normal what it would look like. But some of these spots are just a little bit heavier, and I've gone ahead and also started to overseed, and partly to make sure all this is level, but partly just to fill in some of those spots there. All right, and with that, the grass is ready to grow. Well, the seed is ready to grow. Hopefully it turns into grass. Excuse the noise, the neighbor's got some rototilling going, so I'll have to peek over the fence and see what's going on in his backyard. But what we have here, you saw I went ahead and had the seed very generously put down, probably way more than what I needed, but with it being older, decided to go with that. I took a lot of my potting mix that has some peat moss mixed in with that, and thinly layered that over it all. Put a little bit more sand and compost, so it's basically about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch overall. I can still see a little bit of seed in some spots, and I'm not going to worry about that. That stuff probably won't grow, but I know I've got this pretty well covered up. And then I went ahead and rolled it one last time and sprayed it down. It's nice and moist, and I'll keep this thing wet probably once a day. I'll come through and moisten it down, but if the temperatures really start to warm up and cause a potential drying out, then I'll be spraying this down twice a day. But just want to keep this moist over the next couple weeks. It's going to germinate and start growing as the weather is starting to warm up here in the Northwest. And here we have 6 weeks later. This is the first day it's hit 70 degrees. We've had about 6 weeks of cold and wet, which is okay for germination. Obviously it's worked. I just did my first mowing there, and you can tell the difference between the new grass and the old. That will eventually blend together and also thicken up. Here's the opposite viewpoint. And overall, it's pretty positive. It's better than it was, and I think it'll be good in another couple weeks. Good to go. There will be some other videos in the future about grass situations, both maintenance and problems, leveling it out, brown spots, different things. I got a few things I noticed in my grass that would be helpful probably for all of you. But thanks for tuning in, and have a good life.